Right, it looks like we're live. Excellent. All right, good afternoon, welcome everybody. I'm just going to really quickly check and see we had some people waiting. Do we have any viewers? We've got viewers. If you can see and hear us okay, then pop a comment in the chat box to the right of your screen and just say hello so that we know we're getting through. If anyone is having trouble, they got sound but no picture, or picture but no sound, then give us a shout and we'll see if we can support the technical details. Just going to give it a minute because there's a bit of a lag between me talking and stuff getting to you and stuff you send me showing up, just to make sure that we've got hello. We've got a hello Tabitha, excellent, and Tim, hello, fantastic. Right, so it's working for at least some people. That's brilliant. So welcome to this webinar. We'll be going through the e-learning module, which has been commissioned by the Local Government Association. So this is brought to you by the LGA and in association with the Open Data Institute, which is where I am today. With me is Emily from the ODI. Hello, Emily. Hiya. Emily's going to be helping me by feeding back to me any comments or questions that we get, keeping me on topic and keeping me on time. So hopefully this will be useful and relevant to everybody. So I think we can get started. Any questions coming in yet before we do anything? No. Right, let's do the introduction. So, a bit about me. The reason that it's me doing this are threefold. Firstly, I'm a local government person. I've been working for Devon County Council the last 15 years. I started as a data analyst, a database administrator, and I've gone through a range of jobs, all to do with data and into performance and strategy. And now I'm working very heavily on the data and open data front for Devon. Secondly, I am part of the Open Data Institute network of nodes, so I help to run the ODI Devon node. And we do a lot of local work with supporting people with getting better use out of their data. And thirdly, I'm an Open Data Institute registered trainer, so I'm fine with talking to people and hopefully explaining these concepts to you in a way that helps. So that's me. The structure that we've got, okay, in theory, we were supposed to talk about the module for about 20 minutes. In practice, we did one this morning, and I ended up talking about it for closer to 3/4 of an hour. But we will cover the material and we will then have a bit of a discussion. Actually, I think if people ask questions as we go, and I will keep checking in to see what questions we've got. If you think of something you want to know, just ask. Emily will let me know if I don't spot it myself, and we will go into more detail on anything that's interesting, useful, relevant to you. So I will keep checking in. There is apparently there's 20-second lag between you guys asking me something and me actually seeing it. So forgive me if I end up moving on before I've answered your question. We will get to them, I promise you. Now you can ask a question at any time. Obviously we've got the chat box, so you can pop a comment or a question in there and we'll see it. If you're logged into Knowledge Hub, you can use that to comment or to ask a question as well. And also if neither of those methods work for you, then you can send an email to training@theodi.org. And Emily is monitoring that and she will give me a shout if anything comes in there. Okay, so that's training@theodi.org. And lastly, I've been asked to mention that Local Government Association would be grateful for any feedback you've got about this webinar, whether it was useful, whether it helped. So the email address for feeding back now or any time in the next few days is transparency@local.gov.uk. Okay, and we'll repeat that later on as well. So before we start, any questions before we even get started? Anything that anybody wants to know before we get into the material? Let's just have a quick look.
I think we're okay.
It looks like a no. Right, let's get started. Right, so I'm going to screen share, and unlike this morning, I'm going to remember to press the screen share button. We live and we learn. So let's do that and share. And that makes this window go squirrely, but this window is perfectly fine. So just going to hold on for a couple of seconds and just check that everyone can see that the screen's now changed and you're looking at the e-learning module, making your data work for you. So if anyone can just pop a comment and say, yes, that looks like, yep, wonderful, thank you, Tim. Tim can see the screen share, hopefully you all can too. So what are these? There's a series of modules which Local Government Association has commissioned, and They're about helping you to get started, and they're about showing you the things that are already happening. So this is not some highfalutin theoretical exercise. These are things that people are doing that have really, really helped to get to grips with your data and to make it work for you. This module, I'm not going to scroll up and down because feedback from this morning was that was a bit disorienting and I should not do that. So I will go down slowly and in sections. The sections that we've got, there's a little bit of an introduction, there's some background about the role of data in local government. There'll be a discussion about some of the tools that can be useful in helping you to manage and to use your data. And then we'll talk about the data maturity model, which people found very interesting this morning. So I'm happy to cover that in quite a lot of detail if you feel the same this afternoon. And a quick note I've written to myself, this is not just about open data, although Open Data Institute are helping and supporting this. If we get our data in good order as if we were planning to publish it and open it, then we're the first beneficiaries. We're customer zero for our own good, clean, validated, structured, machine-readable data. So if we approach it from the view of we need to make this data as useful as possible, then yeah, we can publish that and we can open that up to other people. But we benefit first and most from having data that we can get our hands on, that we can find within our own organizations and we can do stuff with. So that's the main thing that I always try to really shove home that point. Right, so I'm just going to scroll down and we're going to look at just this introductory section on the e-learning module. And this is about the role of data within local government. No prizes for guessing that the word austerity is in there. Obviously, we have had a lot of funding cut. We have lost people and capacity. We have lost skills. But it's also meant that it's not a great time to be saying we want to try shiny new things for their own sake. There has to be a reason why we might be looking into using our data. The other thing about austerity is that it means that we've had to learn to focus down quite hard on the purpose, the reason, the system that we're working with, the job that we need to get done and the outcome. And we've had to focus on the evidence that the things we're doing are the right things. So what are we here for and how do we know if we're succeeding? And this is where obviously having good data at your command, having it accessible, discoverable and usable is critical. Now in local government and so my 15-year career, obviously I've seen this, our data is as a byproduct. It's not the thing itself, it's an exhaust product of delivering the service. So we focus on the people we're here to serve, and some of those are the most vulnerable people in our communities, and we are getting the job done in that we're trying to meet their needs or to help them in some way. And the data is just something that happens to fall out of doing that and helps us to get the service delivered. And usually a little bit on top, you know, the icing on the cake, something we need to report up to central government, which means that our focus has not been on turning that data into an asset that can be reused and turned into new data products and new insights. But now we're finding that with developments in technology and data storage, developments in visualization and analytics and informatics, that we have a lot of new ways that we can analyze our data and turn it into new insights. And we have more and more people are interested from outside the council in what we have and in using it to do things that either weren't really on our radar or just weren't a priority. We just don't have the time or resource to devote to it. So people out in the community are looking at doing something for general community benefit, or people are looking at some sort of economic stimulus, some tool that they could build that will help people, and at the same time, hopefully, you know, they can turn into a business. So that's the open data side. What can we be sharing that will help other people get stuff done that perhaps is either not our priority right now or just not something that we've even considered? And all of this is very exciting developments, but possibly means that we're looking at, we need some new skills, we need to learn about some new tools. And that can be, I've got a note here that just says, don't panic, in big block capitals. It's not as complicated, it's not as scary, it's not as expensive as it sounds. There are a lot of tools that we can use that actually don't cost a lot of money or any money at all. We can even just be doing more and better things with spreadsheets. Because one thing we know about in local government is how to use a spreadsheet. So this is not necessarily about the tech, this is about how good is our data, how easy is it to take it and turn it into a useful communication, a set of insights, something that tells us what's going on, what's the focus. So we'll steer clear of talking about the tech as the be all and end all. This is about how do we turn our data into a thing we can use. My final note is just saying this is all doable. This is all absolutely doable, and there is a lot of support. So if you're not certain where to get started, and if this webinar raises a lot of questions for you that we maybe don't get around to answering, then the Open Data Institute obviously has a lot of tools to do with getting your data more usable, more structured, with a view to getting it published. Local Government Association has a lot of support around releasing open data as a government organisation and helping you with ways of doing that. And there are networks of local government people, like Local Gov Digital is one of them. There are others who are always thrilled to hear from new colleagues and to help and support and to share knowledge and processes and tools that they've used. So do get in touch if you want to hear more about any of those types of support that would be available. So I'm just going to hold for a moment just to see if there are any comments or questions on that bit so far. Emily is shaking her head, so I'm taking that to mean that just at the moment we don't seem to have anything coming in, nothing coming in on email either. Good. No, okay. So I'm just going to scroll down rather. I'm on a Mac, so everything's backwards. I'm going to scroll to the section on tools that enable better data use. Now these e-learning modules all follow a particular style in that if there is a section with case studies or examples, you get these blocks that you can expand and go into the detail in the text. And this one is about the technology that exists, and there are certainly plenty of new systems and tools that you can purchase as a council, and there are plenty of people who will be only too happy to come in and sell these to you and tailor them to your needs and get them plugged in and connected to your systems to help you get the job done. One comment that we had from this morning was, let's not focus on the individual products, which is fine because I'm not an expert on the complete range and it's not my job to sort of recommend specific things, but rather to think about what is the thing that would make the difference to you in your organisation where you are now to get the most use out of your data. So I'm going to start by expanding this one on data integration systems. Just scroll up so that you can see the text on that one. So hands up anybody who hears the phrase legacy systems and gets a shiver down their spine. I know I do. We have these systems. They are of variable usefulness. Some of them literally just do the job they were set up to do, which might be storing the names of people who access a particular service. Some of them, some of the newer ones, are coming through and they have very sophisticated reporting tools and visualization tools. Some of them have APIs. I'll gloss that just in case. APIs, application programming interface, is a way of automatically requesting data from a system using just a handful of lines of code and just saying, bring me this data in this format. So a little bit like running a report, except you don't have to go into a report writer, you can just use a browser. Excuse me a second. I need to cough. So we certainly have a lot of systems that maybe don't talk to each other as well as they might, and to get most use out of the data that we already have and to avoid collecting a whole bunch of new data to make what we have usable, there are systems that can connect what you have and put it all together into one place. And there are various products on the market. I'm not going to talk to you about what those are because I dare say you've heard the names of various products anyway. But the point of having something like that is that it takes out huge amounts of manual processing that we currently do. And I know that this is absolutely true of when my role was just to move data from one place to another. So the amount of manually moving things in and out of spreadsheets, the amount of lookups, VLOOKUPs that I had to do to pull in stuff like the right geography for a particular postcode, and the amount of manipulation I had to do within the database and using SQL queries to pull out just what I needed and not like the whole table. And we all find our workarounds, but you get to a point where what you need is a system that can talk to each of the other systems and bring you what you've asked for. The example that's here in the module is the Camden Residence Index, which actually talks to 16 different systems, which is quite impressive. And that helps to compare cases, to look up where people are appearing, and to see if there are ways to reduce the amount of time spent dealing with different cases when you could be talking to one person. It makes the service itself quicker and easier to deliver, and it can help to flag up potential fraud and errors. So definitely a saving there. And back at Devon County Council, we've got a similar sort of arrangement with a system that is making sure that if we have a child appearing in the education system and we have another entry for somebody who's in fostering and adoption system or in children's social care system, to check whether that is in fact the same child and whether we should be looking at having some way of saying, yes, this is talking about the same individual and there are people who need to know that this is happening over in education at the same time as this other thing is happening in social care. And I'm sure you will all have similar examples and know about cases where that will definitely help. And we have that complete picture of somebody who is very vulnerable and needs our help. Then we want either those systems talking to each other or something that can make that connection. Well, I'm going to stop for a moment to swig my tea and check again whether there are any questions. No.
Not yet, you're obviously covering everything.
I'm obviously hitting all the right buttons, or people are like, when is she going to get onto the stuff we're actually interested in? Could go either way, but that's fine. Right, so I will shut down data integration, and the next block here, which I'm expanding, is data portals. So two different types are mentioned here. One, I think, is about bringing information, bringing a unified view of information to the right person at the right time, so that if a resident is looking at transacting with the council, then actually they don't have to enter things into 3 different places just to get the one thing that they wanted. And there's also something about remote staff who are working out in the field or working at different bases, or who have a mobile device that maybe can't connect specifically to the system they would need to use, can still get a view of the information that they need right there and then to do their job. And again, there are all sorts of products that will help you to do that, and you might want to think about where in the organisation is there a need for that, and start to do some research into, you know, what difference would that make, and who you might want to talk to about the products that are available. And then the other type of portal is the one about showing what data you have that you are willing to share and to publish. So talking about specifically about open data. There are products on the market where the supplier will come and, you know, sort of talk to you about your requirements and set something up for you and set you up a process that enables you to publish quite simply and easily. But in fact, the hard work about publishing, sharing open data goes into making that data clean, validated, structured, machine-readable data. You're going to have to do that work either way. There are some tools that will help you with the cleaning and the structuring, but you still need to do that. And very much the point of this webinar and of the module that we're looking at is about, is your data fit for purpose? Is it fit to be used? You know, can you get what you need from it? So there are cheap and in some cases free ways to just publish the data that you've got without having to buy a full bells and whistles, fully functional data portal. And again, I can talk about some examples of that towards the end if that's something people would like to hear about. It looks like, do we have a question? Is that, no, that's you asking questions. Emily's trying to encourage you guys to ask questions. So do chip in if you have examples from where you are that you think you might be useful, might support what we're talking about right now. Or, you know, challenge, that's good too, we like that. Right, I'm going to move on a bit and I'll expand now. So the third block that we're looking at here is, and we have a comment.
An example of a data portal, Lucy.
An example of a data portal, righty-ho. So, so I won't name specific suppliers and vendors because otherwise I think it could be construed as advertising. But I can, so 3 ways that you can do these things for next to no money. You still have to do some of the work. One is, and quite a lot of councils I think do this, is you simply put those data sets that you want to publish into your website CRM, content management system. No? CMS, there you go. Content management system, and then you just have a web page with links through to the data sets you want to publish. And that is perfectly fine and good enough. You will then get feedback from people who want to use the data about whether it's what they needed in the right format and so on and so forth. That's good, because that starts that dialogue. A second way that you can do this, and we make use of this as well at Devon, is to use GitHub, which is a repository for sharing code rather than data, but they're quite happy for you to use it for data. It costs nothing as long as you don't go mad with putting far too much in there. And what's good about that is you get version control, and you get really good sort of audit of who is using, downloading, looking at your files. And they can't change your stuff without your permission. So we had an example where local developer helped us fix an issue with the data set. They ran a program that corrected what we'd done with the map projection. We got the wrong one. And they sent us a corrected version, and we just pulled that back into our repository, and we had a corrected version thanks to them. So that can be quite helpful. A third way that you can do it for next to no money, there are open source versions of data portals. The best known one is probably CKAN, that's C-K-A-N, all caps. If you Google that, it'll come up with, now it's quite a technical thing. If you want to have one of those, then you're going to want somebody who can code to install that and make that happen. But once you have it, it's quite easy to operate. And it can have a WordPress front end. So if you're comfortable with WordPress, then that can be quite useful. And there is a version called DKAN, D-K-A-N, which has a Drupal front end. Drupal is another content management system similar to WordPress. I'm in danger of getting into techie details, which I got told not to do this morning. But those are some of the things that you have. And then there are big, exciting, very sexy, very beautifully put together, fully functional open data and data sharing portals from a lot of the major suppliers that you can have. So there really is a huge range, and you can start with something cheap or free and basic and work your way up to something more fully featured once you know what it is going to be the most use. I'm just going to pause again for a moment and see whether that's generated more questions.
So we have a question from Tabitha in Somerset. Well, it's a comment really. They don't have a portal in Somerset, but they're discussing about how they use data in libraries. Is that something you've come across?
Yes, it is actually. As the node, as ODI Devon, we've been talking to the library service, which now is a staff mutual rather than a council service, about what open data the library service itself could generate and put out, and also what open data the library service could use to mash up with their own information to examine the impact of having an active functional library service and library premises. What is it that libraries are particularly good at, and is that the same as it ever was, or is that changing as we're moving into more of a knowledge economy, and what can libraries do to support that? So yeah, we've absolutely, I think, Tabitha, I think they're going to suspect you're a plant, because I know that you were at the Discovery Day. So, but thank you anyway for raising that one. Libraries could potentially put out quite a lot of open data, because people are interested. Libraries seem to be a service that's very close to people's hearts. And if you look back at how and why libraries were founded in the first place, it's about access to information. It's about democratizing access to information for all. So it's very much in line with more transparent government and with more open data, because it is about making sure everybody gets that same opportunity to examine the evidence and what's going on. So thank you for that. Good question.
We have another question from Nick, another one of the big questions.
Okay.
So there can be a lot of issues when it comes to data integration. There's a lot of issues around quality, or there can be a lot of issues around quality. What do you think the future is for using other approaches to try and link? He's put an example of fuzzy logic.
Yes, indeed. Okay. Right. Take note. It wasn't me who got technical. This one has been given to me, and that's absolutely fine. There are now lots of tools that are available for matching two bits of data or two clusters of data. So you've got, first name, surname, and a postcode or whatever, and saying, do we think these are the same people, given that it's a variable quality, variable completeness. And I think the best tools are ones that will let you look at different ways of saying, okay, if I match it using this particular algorithm, it's a sort of a 73% chance that they're the same, and I can go with that. I'm fairly confident that means the same. And if I run the same data through a first pass of another tool and uses a slightly different algorithm, and that gives me a 96%, so yes, I'm happy. So yeah, I think that we are going to be seeing, not necessarily that we need to use these quite technical algorithms ourselves, but we will be seeing more of the systems that were offered bringing in more of that functionality. And I think that certainly, I was talking to people about machine learning on Monday, as you do within government. We're going to learn what are the most useful tools to hand, and also how much effort do you put in all the hours to make sure that something is perfect, or do you go with something that is probably accurate enough? If you're talking about vulnerable children, people with long-term health issues or mental health issues, you're talking about the elderly or the disabled, you don't want to be taking chances with those people's the delivery of a service to that person. You don't want to be taking chances with their future. If you're talking about the likelihood of a particular lamppost needing replacing, and whether or not it's been reported correctly because someone's not put in the complete postcode, then you can accept a slightly lower level of certainty about the matching. So there is definitely something about how much effort do we put into this and what level of certainty we're prepared to accept. Thank you, that's another really good question.
And if you wanted more information about data quality, or how to ensure your data is good quality, where should you go?
Oh, okay. Another good one. Well, there are a lot of places you can go. If you want information about how to make sure your data is the very best, most usable quality it can be, then Open Data Institute have some excellent materials around making sure that what you've got is structured, machine readable. There's the whole question. Should I mention CSV lint? No? Okay, fair enough. Too techy. There are online tools that you can use to check that the structure of your data means that any machine that comes across it can recognize it and use it straight away. So you can look for sort of structure checkers, CSV checkers, and that sort of thing. There are tools for manually going through and looking at your data and tidying it up as much as possible, and Open Refine is a good example of that. Again, it's free. At Devon, it's actually now something we're allowed to download and install on our corporate machines. We made the case for it being something that we could use. Your data doesn't go anywhere, it stays on your machine, it doesn't go up to anybody else's cloud. Although the tool does open in a browser window, it's actually still located on your machine, it doesn't go anywhere else, so it's secure. And that's really good for some of that fuzzy matching. It's really good for clustering things that look a bit the same and checking whether or not they really are. It's really good for making sure everything that looks like a number is a number, everything that looks like a date is a date, or if it's not, it knows it's not. And that's got a useful functionality for if you've done that to one data set and then you get next month's extract is in the same sorry state, as you can save the steps you took to clean it up last month and apply it to this month's file automatically. So that's rather good.
There is, sorry to jump in, Lucy. So on the lga.learndata.info website, there are 6 e-learning modules. The second one, Making Publishing Work for You, talks about publishing quality data, and there is also an exercise to help you get started with using Open Refine.
There we go. And I think if that's the exercise I'm thinking of, Emily, the one that's at the end of the training day, that is really excellent because it does take you through the 3 or 4 functions of Open Refine that you will use repeatedly and shows you how to do it, as well as then going on to some sort of optional other bits and pieces you can look at. So I highly recommend that.
Quickly, still on quality, this is again from Nick. So matching, using tools for best match sounds good, but sometimes children's names have changed, date of birth can be incorrect. So I think that's about the quality of the data that you are given
Yes, yes, absolutely, and that is very true. Is that sometimes child names are changed for a very good reason, for the child's safety. If the child's been adopted and their birth name is changed, and they have an adoptive family gives them a different name, there can be all sorts of reasons why actually you don't want two records to be linked, even if it is the same child, and there can be all sorts of reasons why. You might have data that is impossible to match because there's no common points. That is going to happen. But I know our experience in Devon was that the tool that we were working with was efficient enough to match up, even where a child's name had been completely changed, new address and everything. That it very effectively pulled data from lots of different systems and said, we think this is the same child. And then we had to actively break that link and say no, because we don't want these two records being associated with each other, because whether it was a case where a child had been rehomed because of violence or danger, or whether it was a case where a child had been adopted and there were no links to be had, no use in having links to their previous records. But the tool itself was very, very good. But yes, that is a good point.
So a couple of people have asked if you could just repeat the example portals. I think maybe we might need to speak up a bit.
Okay, I'll speak up a bit and I'll lean into the computer a little bit more and see if that clarifies things.
Just so we could repeat those portals that we talked about before.
Okay, so I think this is specifically talking about CCAN and DCAN, if I'm correct. If you could pop them in the comment box as well, Emily, and then people can see it actually written down. So CCAN is open source data publishing portal package, and you can use WordPress as a front end. DCAN is a similar thing, except it uses Drupal, which is a different content management system, as a front end. You will need a techie person to talk you through that, but if you are a techie person, go mad and have a go, because actually it's not that complex to have a go. And the simpler versions are even more simple than that. We're just publishing it on your website and using your content management system to contain the data sets, and a simple web page linking to the different data sets is also perfectly acceptable to get you started, as is using GitHub, which, if you're familiar with GitHub, it's for storing code, but it can also store all sorts of other files. And GitHub themselves are quite comfortable with you using it for data, as long as you don't go over the storage size limits for the free version, which we use at Devon. We use both GitHub and our content management system, depending on what it is we're working with and what's more appropriate.
We have a very interesting question from Martin in West Sussex, saying they would love to use open source products like this, but their IT says no. It's a argument we hear quite a lot, yes. And they have lockdown machines. So, is there any advice from you or from anybody else about overcoming these challenges and convincing IT departments as to the use of such tools?
Okay. I think that for something like OpenRefine, you're going to need some fairly senior support. You're going to need somebody to say, my people need this tool because it's going to save a lot of time and hence a lot of money manually cleaning up data that's in a poor state. And there's a sound business case for doing this. And then on top of that, you will then need to make the case that it is absolutely secure, because the data never leaves your machine. It never touches anybody else's system. It doesn't get sent to anybody else's server. The data set is on your machine, and that's where it is, and that's where it stays. So there is no information security risk unless your machine's already compromised. And ICT, I would hope, would be absolutely confident that that's not the case. So if your machine is secure, then OpenRefine is secure. So I think those are 2 points. That senior support thing, this is a thing that we need to get the job done, and it will result in an efficiency saving and in better quality data. And secondly, this is an absolutely secure thing. There is no information security risk at all, because it stays on your machine. As far as CCAN goes, at Devon, we're very fortunate that we have a certain amount of leeway, and we have like a sandbox environment where we can play. I mean, at the moment it's basically mostly WordPress, But I'm hearing a lot about different central government departments are talking about setting up like a secure private cloud environment where people can play with code if that's the sort of thing that they want to do or they want to evaluate for a particular project. So my personal way to get around using some of these things is to practice and test things on my personal device, which is nothing to do with work, using open data, which is not sensitive or personal in any way. And then when I have a working prototype, to then show that to people and say, this is what I mean, this is what I think we need, this is what I'm talking about. Is there a way that we can turn this into a reality within the council? And again, it's taking that to the people who are able to set that policy and say, and talk to senior people in IT and say, this is the thing that we need, and we need you to help us create a secure environment where people can work on this. So as always, it comes down to prototype it somewhere if you can, or find an example of someone else has built. There are lots of portals based on CCAN that you can show to people and say, here's what I mean, here's what I think we should have. Get that senior support so that you can make that case and say, this will help us in these ways. And have that conversation with ICT saying, this is there is a way we can do this securely without compromising machines. And can you help me to get that set up on a test machine or on a limited number of users, a limited set of users' machines, so that we can show the value of this. I hope that helps.
Tim has added a useful example, talking to Stephen Blackburn at Leeds City Council, who managed to jump through all these hoops to get approval to deploy CCAN in Data North. So if you are struggling, there's another person that you can talk to.
Absolutely, and I know Stephen, and I will say that again, he's one of those people who is always delighted to support any colleague who's going through the process he's already been through. Only too happy to share information. He's a really good guy. So Stephen Blackburn, Stephen with a PH. If you Google him, he will pop right up, because he's always talking about the excellent work they've done at Data North and within Leeds City Council. And he's a really, really lovely guy, very approachable. Stephen, if you're one of the people who's listening, I'm sorry for just basically telling everybody to email you, but I know you'll take it in your stride.
Yeah, I hope he's okay with that.
I'm sure he's fine with that. And sorry, you were going to say.
We also have a suggestion from Craig saying, I'd suggest getting your information governance officer on your side, so then IT have nothing to hide behind.
Okay, it's a good point. And yes, absolutely, you should be talking to your information governance officer or team. And I think I mentioned in this morning's webinar, and I forgot to mention this one, no matter how much we talk about the tech and the data and get into the technical details, this is very much still about people and about having a sort of relationship with information governance, with ICT, with data owners around the organisation, with policymakers and decision makers, where they trust that you know what you're doing, or that you have a specific strategic goal in mind, and that you're looking for a way to improve the way we deliver services or to improve the way we report. And it is about making friends across your organisation and bringing them the information that they need to reassure them that this is a good idea. In my experience, if ICT are concerned and they think that you are a bad risk, then they will continue to hold that opinion unless you can show them where it has already been done and the risk has been well managed and mitigated. So yes, it's good to have something from information governance that says Data Protection Act says you can absolutely do this, or information governance processes and statutes say you can do this. That can help. But ICT's concern is about more than just information security. It's about potential attack vectors, like having lots of people writing code on the corporate system is going to make them very uncomfortable indeed. Which is why a secure sandbox environment is such a good idea, because as our digital people said to me when they set the one up that I use, if you break that, that's your problem. It doesn't affect anybody else in this organization. Nobody else is going to be troubled by anything you do wrong. So if you mess up, too bad, so sad, you have to rebuild, and that's not our concern. You literally can do anything you want, but on your head be it. And that has been really good, because I have messed up. I have had to burn it down and restart from the beginning a couple of times, which has been a wonderful learning experience. But I've been able to do that without inconveniencing or risking anybody else's work or work processes, which has been really, really helpful.
So we have another question on a similar theme here. This is from Fiona, and I've just lost the question, which is excellent. Fiona. So she has a question around data protection and the need to ensure that the use of data is consistent with data protection and registration. This is often thrown as a reason for why we shouldn't share data internally. And I just like to say, Fiona, it's not just local government. It's a constant thing whenever anyone talks about data sharing or open data. Yeah,
absolutely. We had a very similar discussion this morning. We had several questions and comments along the same theme. Yes, so data protection is frequently used as a cloak to hide behind. And the thing to remember, and again, this is about people. This is about people being concerned that if they do you this favor and share this data and something goes wrong, they are the people who will get canned for it, because they have no control over what you do once they've given you the data. So there is a need to reassure them, firstly, that you are a trustworthy person and that you will do just the right things with that data and nothing else. But also, if people are using Data Protection Act and they're just literally just saying the words like some sort of talisman, sorry, data protection says no, which we do see a lot. And I think that the central government, the Cabinet Office approach to this was to say, bring me back the exact chapter and verse of the statute that says you may not share with me. Show me where in the statute it says you can't share with me for this purpose, and I will accept that answer and I will go away and I will never bother you again. And in a very high proportion of cases, people will come back and say, no, it turns out you're right. Yes, we can't, we could say no, but actually data protection wouldn't be the reason. So yeah, maybe we'll talk. And the other thing that came up this morning was, that, as quite a lot of people pointed out, talk to your information governance team. They know about this stuff. They will be able to tell you. They're highly trained, they're smart people, they're experts in this. This is what they do. So if you have an information governance person, they will know what is okay, what is not okay. They will have pattern templates for data sharing agreements, and that is a great way to reassure people that, if something does go wrong, how will it be dealt with, what scenarios are covered, what is acceptable, what is allowed and what is not. So I think somebody mentioned this morning as well, the Information Commissioner's Office has some really good sort of template documents that you can use. So some sort of, and I think it's a dialogue, creating an agreement that says, I will let you have this data, and you in turn will promise not to do the following things, A, B, C, and if this scenario comes up, we will handle it in this way. And then there is accountability then, and people will be reassured. So I hope that helps.
So we've got a comment from Peter, who's just saying pretty much the same thing. It's used as a shield, as an excuse.
Yeah.
Tim has a suggestion. So it's Tim Adams from the LGA, suggesting that you could find a counsellor champion who can help ask the right questions and keep up persistent pressure.
Yes.
And again, I guess that translates into your open by default. Why does this have to be closed? Yes, if it's personal data, it can be, but
yeah, absolutely. That and again, what I was saying about senior support. If you yourself are getting nowhere, but you have the opportunity to talk to a service head or a department head or a director, or even, depending on the size of your organisation, if you're on first name terms with the chief exec, because they're that sort of person, and I think this does go on, certainly is in Devon. As a lot of our top people are very approachable, they're very friendly, our counsellors, certainly the cabinet members make a point of being very visible and approachable, and will want to know if something like this is coming up. It's not to say that you are tattling and getting people into trouble, but rather saying, I think we can get a lot further forward if I can get this thing done, but I'm being blocked, and I wonder if you can help me to build that relationship and ask the question about why this is a problem and what I can do to reassure people that actually we should be allowed to do this. So it's remembering always to be sensitive to the people you're trying to deal with are not being difficult for the sake of being difficult. they are blocking you because they are afraid of what may happen if you do something wrong, and they have no way of knowing or no control over what it is you're going to do. So there needs to be relationship building there. Okay.
So just one last comment before I think we should move on to the maturity model. This is again from Fiona, who's clearly a champion of open source software. Open source is the future, exclamation mark.
Okay.
The issue can often be supporting applications, but a lot of open source products have paid for support options if required. And she just says open source software is inherently more secure than a lot of proprietary platforms in her view.
Okay.
What's your response to that?
I think Fiona's trying to start a fight, if I'm honest, but that's okay. Yes, so open source software is supported by people who will get on the case very quickly if malware or attack vectors are developed against it, and who will act to sort out bugs and to make it more secure, more stable. I don't know if I would say that makes it inherently more secure, but I think what it is more in tune with the philosophy that a lot of councils are adopting, which is we can do some of these things ourselves if we have a chance to actually put stuff together to see how it works. I think that open source software is certainly robust enough and secure enough for councils to use. If you have some of the skills in-house and some sort of friendly people to give you advice, and believe me, there are plenty of those. It certainly should not be regarded as inherently flaky and insecure just because it's not Microsoft or just because it's not some other system that you're used to paying for. So yeah, I'm not going to get into the whole fight about whether it's definitely better or definitely not better. It's absolutely a valid option. It is not the preserve of nerds alone in their rooms anymore. It is in use in a lot of places. It supports far more things than you would think possible. Not everything in the world is run by sort of big proprietary systems. So open source is absolutely a valid alternative. Okay, and I think I handled that diplomatically.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Fiona, for bringing that one up. It's good to talk about it. So
Should we move on to the maturity model?
Absolutely. I will just scroll that up while we do that, just in case anyone is frantically typing right now, and their comment will turn up in about 20 seconds because of the lag. Looks like we're okay. Okay, so
The end.
Sorry?
We need to go back to the beginning.
We need to go back. Oh, sorry. Yes, we're on the wrong tab. Right. So the data maturity model, which I think this is really, really useful. I will show you in a minute the report that this has come from as well. And if anyone from LGA could chip in with the URL for that as well in the comments box, that would be really helpful, but I will show it to you in a moment. So data maturity is about how far along the organization is in this journey, if you like, the way that it manages and it uses its data. I was talking to some people yesterday, said I don't think this is a journey as much as it's a bit of a jigsaw that you are working on. One front, you might be working on data quality and completeness, and then another day you may be working on doing something different with analysis, and that pushes you back to looking at the data quality because the analysis showed up that data quality needed looking at. Your analysis may then also show up that you've got some needs on data storage and so on and so forth. So it's not necessarily a straightforward linear thing. But this model is a good one because it deals with 5 different aspects of data maturity. Data management being one, which, fairly obviously it's about collecting data. How good are we at doing that in the way that makes it useful? How good are we at organizing it? And what quality is the data that we've got? And across the top, you've got the stages that an organization can be at. This is all explained in more detail in the report, which I'll look at in a minute. But so nascent is like literally just emerging, blinking into the sunlight. just got started. Basic is doing quite a bare minimum but functional amount of things, but still some work to do. As an intermediate phase, a more advanced phase, and then data vor, which is the phrase I think that Nesta have come up with, describes those counsels who are voraciously consuming data and making really, really, really good use of it. So top of the tree, I think, in terms of this evolution. So that's data management. The next one is the data governance. So how good is the organization at not just having its data, but knowing where it is, what and what can be done with it? How good is it at sharing appropriately and publishing appropriately? What processes are there? How sure can you be that if you're doing something, it's the right thing to do? And that goes back to the discussion we've just had about data protection and information governance. Do you know who to talk to in your organization? If you do, great, then you're somewhere shading towards the advanced end. If you're really not sure, then that is a thing that needs working on. So that's the data governance. We've got data use. And this one I find interesting because this is just about, we know there are going to be tens, if not hundreds of people, depending on the size of the organization, working on creating data products, you know, KPI trackers and dashboards and balanced scorecards and performance books and so on and so forth. But how are those used? Do they actually plug into the decision making? Does somebody actually take that, look at it and say, I have seen the evidence and therefore I think that the policy direction we need to take is this one? Or do they go, okay, we've all looked at the performance book, we've looked at 15 charts and 73 tables, and now we're going to make the decision based on a gut feeling or a political direction because we think it's the right thing to do. And then some organizations do one, some do the other, some do both on the same day. It's a very variable thing. So to what degree do you actually find that data being used, being trusted and being plugged into the decision-making process? And that can vary across departments, it can vary from one end of the day to the other. And the same for the performance and evaluation section and for the optimizing how we're doing what we're doing and automating what we do. So making sure that the data is being used, that's what that one is. Data skills, and I always take issue when people say that local government doesn't have the skills. We absolutely do. They just may not be in the places you'd expect to find them. You will have people who can do some of this stuff, even if the job description doesn't mirror what you think it is that's needed. And for example, my job description, my job title is project manager. I'm a nerd. I code and I do data. So my job description does not reflect what it is I'm currently doing. And I know that I have colleagues who are very much into this stuff, but it's not in their job titles either. So do look around you. If you think that you're at sort of the nascent or the basic stage and you don't have the skills in your authority, I think you'll be surprised. And again, this is about reaching out, finding out who the people are who can support and what sorts of skills do you think you might need. It might not be like the very top end, very technical skills that you need straight away, especially if you're looking at purchasing a product from a supplier. The technical stuff might be taken care of, but you do want to talk to people who understand the ways data can be used. You might want to be looking at some training in the organization around getting the value out of your data, really putting it to work and making sure that it does the things you need it to do and what you can do to change that. And that is about understanding the outcomes that you need, and it's about communicating that to the right people more than it is about technical things and black boxes that plug into other things. And I think the final one on there is the data awareness and culture, and it kind of feeds back into the skills thing. This is about, do people understand how and why data makes a difference and why it matters? If you're working right at the front line, if you're answering calls in a call center, or if you are frontline, you're teaching, you're a social worker, you're in social care somewhere, you're in health somewhere, and you are absolutely frontline, you're dealing with the person who's in front of you, then a performance book is probably not high up on your list of priorities to worry about. You'll give the data you're told to give to feed into that process, but it's not your main concern. And quite right, because actually that job is about helping the person you're speaking to right now, doing what you can for them, looking at that case and doing what you can. So there is something about making sure that people do understand that the information they pass on matters. The completeness, the accuracy, the timeliness of the data that they put together does matter. But getting it into the system in the right way at the right time does matter. And finding a way to make sure that everybody understands that, and that there is a feedback loop that says, if doing this data entry, data capture is a hassle, and that means it doesn't get done, then we need to look at how that data capture is being set up, because if we need that data, we have to make it possible. We have to make it more streamlined for people to do that whilst still getting their job done. Never forgetting that doing the job is the main reason that they're there, rather than making life easier for the data analysts. Excuse me. So, do we have any questions on the maturity model yet?
Not as such. As with this morning, I think this is quite new to quite a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are seeing this for the first time, that's fine. But what would your advice be, Lucy? Where can you go next if this is the first time you're seeing it? What do you do with it?
Sure. So I'd seen this before it came up in the module. I'm just going to switch tabs in my browser. This came through from a report that Nesta wrote called Wise Counsel: Insights from the Cutting Edge of Data-Driven Local Government, which is a lovely, short, snappy title. But it's a good descriptive one. This report is really excellent, and it's 114 pages. But when I first got my hands on it, I printed it out and I took it with me on several train journeys, and took it home and had my red pen and a highlighter and some post-it notes, and went through it and just marked and highlighted and scribbled on all the bits that I thought were relevant. And what I found when I was done with that was that I had something like 15 points that I wanted to take to my head of service and say, these are the things I think we should be doing more of. These are the things I think we should be doing less of. These are the things I think we should be doing differently. These are the things I don't think we're doing at all yet and we need to do. And the data maturity model was the defining sort of, this is a really, really useful thing. So I think it's page 105 of this particular document that describes what it looks like if you're at a particular stage. So I'm looking at data management, I'm looking at specifically collection of data. And if you are at a nascent stage, then your data is just a byproduct of service delivery and driven by somebody else's needs and KPIs. And at the other end of the scale, data is collected extensively across all the services, provides a holistic view. It's an organizational asset and it's valued in its own right, and a lot of thought goes into how it can be better used. So you can take this and you can use it as a self, what's the word I'm searching for here?
Assessment.
Self-assessment, thank you. Looking at as a self-assessment tool and say, right, where are we on here? And across all the different sections, so data management, data use, data awareness, and so on and so forth, and skills and capability, where are we? And actually, where do we want to be on these things? What's a priority right now? If we're looking at data management and finding that we're actually really good at that, but around data awareness, we are right back at the beginning, then there are some steps that we might need to take around that. So I think this could be really helpful if it's combined with the approach. I believe it's kind of based on the ODI pathway for your open data publishing, which is another thing that you could look up because that's really helpful. Even if you're not thinking about publishing open data, the ODI pathway is really good for saying, if you are here with your data, if you're at this stage at the beginning, and you would like to prioritize improving, here are the practical actions you can take. If you are worried about getting your data, turning it into something that's used in decision making, then right, well, then what you need is you need to talk to those senior people and get that support. You need to create this case and you need to have a policy document, you need to have a pitch so you can talk to senior people. So this is a really good tool, and I think that what's needed now is that the practical, this is what you should do next. I'm seeing comments.
So that's quite a useful segue into, Tim and Alex at the LGA are looking into turning this into a self-assessment tool, so an online tool. So they've asked us just if you do have any thoughts on that or any feedback about what that could look like, please do get in contact with them at transparency@local.gov.uk, or you might have your own ways of getting in contact with them directly. Quite a few people are saying this is quite useful. It'll be interesting to see, and hopefully, Fiona, that answers your question as well about how you can work out what level you're in. Lucy's gone through the criteria which you can assess yourself at, but Tim and Alex are looking into turning this into an online tool.
Yeah.
So we have another question from Nick from Knowledge Hub. Knowing who is using what data and how is a challenge, as often it can be obscure, so especially a problem for open data. So any thoughts on the importance of engaging both ways with users and potential users? So it's about feedback loops.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. One thing I would say, and this is possibly controversial, is that I personally am not interested in the metrics of how many people have accessed XYZ dataset. That feels to me like it's an easy thing to measure, but it doesn't tell me how many people got real value out of that data, or what they did with it, or what they found good about it, what they found bad about it. My thoughts about engaging with data users are, and you can probably see this coming, it's about people. It is about the relationships that you have. And I mentioned earlier about the example where a local developer corrected, we made a boo-boo, we put out some data that wasn't quite right, and he corrected it for us because he had the skills. And we'd put the data in a place and in a format that meant he could do that very easily. It is about knowing who is likely to want to use their data, and about opening a discussion with them about how you can give it to them in the most useful and accessible way. And that means potentially being a little more open, a little more vulnerable than we're accustomed to being as a sector, and saying, look, here is what we have. It's not great, it's not finished, it's not perfect, but it is a start, and please, please, please talk to us, and here are the ways that you can contact us, and talk to us about how we can make this better, and how we can make this more structured, how we can improve the format, how we can make it more usable for the things that you want to do with it. So if you use any of the various, if you put your data in GitHub, then you could absolutely make a note of the number of people forking that data, taking a copy and doing something with it. If you use any of the open data portal setups, there are ways of having like a dashboard that tells you how many people have accessed a data set. There are ways of setting it up so that if people download it from your web page, you can sort of use Google Analytics or whatever to see how many people have accessed it. But that doesn't tell you how good an experience that was for them. So talk to your local developer networks, your digital clusters if you've got them, your techie networks, and talk to your critics and the people who are always on about how rubbish you are at being transparent, because they will have views, and they are great people for telling you what it is you could do better. If you're comfortable having that conversation, that's really very, very valuable indeed.
So 2 comments on that. So firstly, if we're looking away from open and towards data protection, it's a very timely conversation with GDPR being the General Data Protection Register coming soon, and that demands that data publishers document use trails and process monitoring. Tim said support from LGA soon, so watch this space, I guess. Good. Oh, and the other thing is, I got a little bit overexcited by saying Alex and Tim are looking at it. They are considering looking at creating an online self-assessment tool. Sorry if that wasn't clear. It says if there is enough interest and demand, so do shout out if you're interested or demanding. I personally would love to see that happen, and will say sort of right here on record, I'd be happy to be part of a group looking at that, because I think that could be a very, very useful thing indeed. I see we have a comment from Mark Braggins. Hi Mark, how you doing? Mark and I have been involved in Open Data Camp, and there is some material on the Open Data Camp blog which might be of interest. You want to specify, Mark, because I know there's a great deal of material on the Open Data Camp blog. So you narrow it down. Is that looking at engagement and users?
Oh, okay, engagement and users. If open data rather than just data generally is your thing, do look up the Open Data Camp blog. We've had 4 Open Data Camp events now and are planning more, and they are a great way of getting in touch with a network of people who care about data, and especially about talking to the people outside councils who want to use that data and do stuff with it. So that's a great way of forming those relationships with the community of data users and consumers.
So I'm conscious of time.
Yeah,
but I have one more. We have
Okay.
actually run over, but there's one more question from Emma, who's been waiting patiently.
Oh, sorry, Emma.
So Emma says her area of focus is gathering data from the public/parish council, translating data to what? Oh, translating data to changing processes. They're doing it, but they could do it better.
Okay.
So are there any examples of good practice anywhere else in the country?
Translating data to sometimes change our processes. That's a good question. I would probably, firstly, I'll direct you back to the Wise Counsel report, because as well as the data maturity model, it's got lots of case studies from, I don't know, it's about 12 or 15 case studies from different councils where they have used the data differently to look at how they could run a process differently. So definitely look those up. Just trying to think offhand of like specific examples. There are probably too many to mention. Apologies, if I'm scrolling, if I make anybody seasick, but I'm just going to move up here and have a little look.
This is probably also worth saying that in the 4th module in the LGA set, so there are 6 in total, this is number 4, so in the 5th module, we look at impact and benefits of better use of data.
Yes.
And there are some stories there as well, and
yes.
we'll be covering those in more detail in the next webinar, which is on the 16th of May.
16th of May.
16th
yes,
of May.
Absolutely. So we will, and I will have done my homework and read up on them by now. But I know that I think one of the examples I didn't go into because we didn't cover the Internet of Things section this time around, but it kind of ties in. Birmingham City Council are using connected sensors to look at different conditions of temperature and weather and so on to help them with their traffic management. And one of the things that they found that they can do differently is they can change the way that they set the routes for gritters when the temperatures drop, by looking at exactly what is going on in specific areas, rather than it's going to get cold, and such a hill is probably going to be icy, so we should send the gritters there first and then we'll just have them do a route round there. They can say it's going to get cold, snow or heavy frost forecast, and our sensors are saying right now that this particular area is dipping below freezing almost as we speak, so the gritters are going there first, and we can change the way things are deployed because we are looking at real-time conditions. So depending if you've got the quality of data and if you've got it coming in real time, or often enough that you are able to track what's going on, or whether that's using sensors or whether that's using observations from human beings or transactions on the website or whatever it is, yes, you can change processes, but there is something about having the space to do that sort of analysis and make a case for doing things differently. And again, you're talking to your senior people and saying, I think we can do better, and here is an example of how I think it could be done. So look up those case studies. Don't forget to talk to the network. So Open Data Camp is one network, really great people. It includes external non-council people as well who can really help. And Local Gov Digital is your local government colleagues network, and they're always delighted to help and to talk to people who are going through the same things they've been through and to offer some help. And goodness, there are probably others. We'd be here all day if I try and name them all. If anybody wants to follow up with me personally, or any of the stuff that I've mentioned that you wanted to go into more detail about, drop an email to Emily at training@theodi.org, and she will prod me and make sure that I follow up, and she'll pass on any queries and comments if people want to be put in touch with specific people.
So I think that's all we've got time for, I'm afraid. Sorry everybody about that. I know there are a couple more questions, but do send them either to training@theodi.org or transparency@local.gov.uk. And one last comment from Nick again is thank you for reinforcing the view that people are the problem, not just technology.
Absolutely.
So once again, thank you everybody, and please do get in contact with us or directly with the LGA if you have any feedback about this, and please do join us as well on the 16th of May.
Yeah, thank you very much everybody. I hope that was useful. We'll see you again.